We are going to move on to our final panel, which is actually a really exciting one, because I do think that this is the beginning of a major shift for life science financing and investment. And that has to do with alternative ways of financing companies and startups, focused on private family offices and philanthropic foundations, using instruments like donor-advised funds. And so we have 5 people here who are experts in that area to talk to you and introduce themselves, and we are going to be digging into this topic much deeper in some of our future meetings. So I welcome our last panel to the stage. So have a seat. I'm going to ask each of you to identify yourself, introduce yourselves and your organization. But we do have a virtual speaker on this panel. I hope we can get him up. Eric Schaefer of March of Dimes. And obviously we're running late and he has a hard stop at 3:30, so I am going to ask him to start. Thank you, Mitch. Can we put Eric Schaefer up? Great. Hi, Eric. Hello, Richard. Thank you for joining us. We're running late, and so I apologize for that, but I thank you for sticking with us and sharing your stories. So, Eric, I know you've got a hard stop. Why don't you get started and tell us what you've been doing at the March of Dimes?
Sure, happy to, and thanks for having me. So I joined the March of Dimes about 4 years ago now to stand up and now lead a venture fund. And it's a new thing for March of Dimes and for many nonprofits. But the idea is to leverage philanthropic contributions. So about 7 or 8 families have donated the capital that we invest in startups to invest in early stage companies aligned to our mission. So for us, it's all pregnancy related kinds of companies affecting mom or baby through the stages of pregnancy, including pre-pregnancy and postpartum. So we're a smaller fund. We're raising 10 million. We're at about 5 million right now. We deployed about half that into 6 different companies to date, and kind of focus around the Series A stage, plus or minus. But again, importantly, we want to support things where it aligns to our mission, where our capital is important, but we also know our name in this space is also our capital. So we want to make sure that we're supportive and deeply involved with the companies that we do invest in. Prior to March of Dimes, I've spent a lot of time in the healthcare sector, UnitedHealth Group, a couple of health systems in the Twin Cities where I live, as well as some consulting firms. So seen a lot of different aspects of healthcare and now bringing that to bear with a venture fund at the March of Dimes.
So is there a science that this venture fund focuses on, or what kinds of companies have you actually invested in?
Yeah, good question. So we're looking at things that are, science-based, medical and science-based. So we're looking at things that will have a significant improvement to the standard of care, which lends itself to investing in companies that are adopted by providers and covered by insurers or part of the bundled payment. So the kinds of companies can be, again, along that continuum, pre-pregnancy through postpartum. But looking at things that can go wrong, and about 10% of the time, there are complications in pregnancy or after birth for the child. So examples of that could be preterm birth, diagnostics and treatments, preeclampsia, labor and delivery, the risks involved in, to the fetus as labor is progressing and into birth. if there's problems due to defects or prematurity or other things, NICU care. So we're really looking for things along that continuum where there are discernible gaps or lagging in the standard of care, for which we think by investing in early stage companies we can bring better solutions to market.
And how do you go about evaluating your potential investments, and how do you differ from a traditional venture capital firm?
Yeah, so first, we are structured and approach things like a traditional venture capital firm. So even though we're a charitable organization and the dollars that we invest are charitable contributions, the model is set up so that we have an evergreen kind of model. So we need to select, as any venture fund would, in things that have, as best as you can, a high degree of confidence that it works and it'll get into the market and hopefully be successful. But the way we select, though, is mission first, and we want to make sure the things we're investing in are addressing, again, some of those areas that align to pregnancy complications. And to help us, in addition to investment committee, like any fund would have in terms of identifying companies and the terms of investments, we have a medical science advisory committee of 5 amazing researchers and providers that help us understand the veracity of the research and the science behind the things that we're investing in, as well as the adaptability and practicality of the innovations to help give some signal of whether or not the market will adopt it. So we use both committees equally to vet the nature of the solution and its likelihood to create clinical value, as well as then adoptability in the market and create financial value as a company, and then therefore as an investment. But again, other than that, we're seeking, and my investment committee reminds me that we are seeking returns on these companies so that we can roll any proceeds we might have from future exits into additional investments in more of an evergreen kind of model.
Terrific, thank you. Richard, Unravel Biosciences, what is that?
Yeah, great to be here. So Unravel Biosciences is a startup that we spun out of Harvard about 4 years ago, with really the mission to make medicines themselves and medicine development predictable. So we call ourselves the Predictable Medicine Company. And what we do is we use primary patient and healthy control RNA data, so molecular data, collected from all around the world, diverse patients. And we use AI, machine learning, very complex network analysis to basically predict novel mechanisms, novel targets, but we use existing molecules to clinically validate them before we even invest a penny in new drug development. Because most new drugs fail. They tend to fail miserably. So I would say 95 to 98% of new molecules, new targets fail in the clinic. And so we're here to really make the process far more predictable. And what we found, with respect to this conference here, what we found is that patients come out of the woodwork when you have a possible repurposing drug. And that's essentially what our platform has enabled. We're not a repurposing company, but by using existing molecules to ask the critical question, does this work in a real patient in the clinic? The corollary to that, if the answer is yes, is, well, let's just use it today, even though there might be an imperfect solution today, while we develop the next generation of therapeutics, but it can have very lasting, substantial treatment capabilities. And so we started actually a program about 2 years ago called RareShift, which is essentially a sustainable financing program. So it's discovery, data generation, and analysis, but we charge cost. We're a for-profit company, but it's essentially a not-for-profit model. We share all the data back for non-commercial use, but we generate these data sets, and it essentially it's a really beautiful partnership with patients, where data on patients, it might be a single patient of a particular type in the world, and we can commercially work on finding therapies for that patient. They can choose to work with their clinicians if they feel that is appropriate, if the clinician feels it's appropriate to test any of the molecules that we identify. In parallel, we're building our own markets, similar therapies, similar therapeutic mechanisms that span diagnoses. And so essentially, we also like to say that we defragment rare disease. And putting those two together, we essentially have this kind of clinical and commercial path to really tackling all these diseases very rapidly in parallel. We've grown from our first program that we licensed from Harvard, where I actually started, to now over 70 different programs. It doesn't mean 70 different molecules, but 70 different disorders that we work on, with roughly about 10 or 12 different molecules actually to treat all of those. And so it's really a data-driven process for clinical de-risking of therapeutic discoveries.
And does this fall in between financing mechanisms in the market today? Is there kind of an innovation gap that you've had to fill with funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think as everybody here is familiar, the last few years have been less than stellar in the biotech investment space. And so there's been less funding, especially for early stage, discovery stage programs. And that's where most of the rare diseases are. They're in very early stages relative to more traditional programs. And not having a lot of traction with investors makes that challenging, and especially investors and grant funding agencies may not fund the really early stages, whereas some of the families are absolutely in need of that, and foundations as well. And so we essentially start doing the research together, and just a cost. Let's cover the cost, right? We're not trying to make money off of it as a CRO would, but let's generate that data and get critical insights that in some cases in a few months have translated into really meaningful impacts for these patients in terms of quality of life, cognitive improvements, neuromotor functions, et cetera. And that drives innovation in the space where, for example, with several families, within a few months, we were able to find 2 molecules that actually could help patients, that their clinicians tested. The foundation, or the family started a foundation that didn't exist for this disease, and now their first program is actually an observational clinical study, which is unheard of, accelerating that pace, and it was at a fraction of the cost of more traditional development, for-profit or nonprofit. And that's what we're really hitting, is getting to that clinical function first, and then kind of backfilling all the science that needs to happen, but really working with patients from the beginning. And that's really been missing in this space.
And have you found that it's easier to attract capital that way once you've demonstrated that clinical value?
Yeah, and I think you see that in the current markets, that clinical data speaks for itself. If you can get to that clinical data faster and cheaper, that's good for you. No one really asks how much money it got you to get there. They sort of ask, well, is it working? Do you have clinical data supporting a given program? And that's what we do. We start with N of 1 patient programs, and then transitioning to these kind of N of few or small formal clinical trials that we're about to embark on. And it's this layering approach that kind of builds confidence in investors to then invest in these programs they might have otherwise avoided.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Mona, can you tell us about Music Beats Cancer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy, and hi, Eric and Richard from afar. So Music Beats Cancer is a charitable organization that I founded, really launched in 2014, but it came together from my own journey. I'm a scientist by training. I worked at the National Cancer Institute, and like many scientists out here, we had a discovery in our lab, and I wanted to commercialize the discovery and move it forward. And of course, like many innovators and entrepreneurs here, as soon as you take something out of the academic world and become an entrepreneur and advance the technology down a commercial path, you start to realize that the biggest challenge is fundraising, especially when it's an early stage, high risk project. And inevitably, and I'm imagining that I'm speaking for most of the entrepreneurs here, what inevitably happens is you're pitching to VCs and the venture community, and inevitably they say, well, great project, but come back when you have more data. And then the next question is, great, but where am I going to get that money? And so early stage dollars is a real kitchen table issue. And I mean, we talk about all these, how do we get around the valley of death, but the fact of the matter is capital is needed, and not just any capital. And this is kind of what I learned in my journey. What I thought was needed was non-dilutive capital for de-risking projects, life science projects. So that's why I started Music Beats Cancer. And really, when I filed for that 501c3, I went to the IRS and I said, you know, this thing, the valley of death that we all keep referring to, it's not just an industry problem, it's a public health crisis. And if we don't move the thousands of early stage startups that are swimming in this valley of death, if we don't move some of them forward, we not only fail as innovators and fail our industry, we're failing our public. And so that is what Music Beats Cancer does. That's what we exclusively do. We can only do is fund companies, early stage companies that are in this valley of death that need non-dilutive capital. And what we do is we connect people who want to see change in the war on cancer, that want solutions and cures, with people who are working on solutions and cures. And Randy here to my left is one of them.
Randy, I'm going to come back to you because we've got the video and I want to show that. So, Michael, can you talk a little bit about what you're working on and the unique challenges of raising money for a venture like that?
Sure. Is this on? Hello? Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. This is a great event. Thank you very much. And what we're doing actually ties in with so many of the other talks. It's been a fantastic day. IXBio, which is short for Institute for Transformative Biotechnology, is a new institute that is I'm the CEO and co-founder of. George Church is also a co-founder, and luminary scientists at MIT, who will be announced shortly, are also co-founders of the institute. Our focus is on technology. Strictly technology development. So this has been a theme running throughout the day. Stem Cell Institute, many others that are talking, Richard, he's talking about technology. We believe that technology is the key to moving science forward.
So you're really talking about tools.
Tools
right?
and technologies, yeah. I mean, I think since
CRISPR.
this is a builder bio meeting, right? if you know, we used to make mud huts, and then we made things out of brick, and then we made things, you know, out of wood, and we got only to, like, say 4 stories. But if you want to build a skyscraper, it takes both tools and technologies. Tools would be things like cranes, but technologies might be elevators or plumbing or other things. So it takes both of these things. I loosely say tools and technologies is what we're focused on in bio. And so yes, CRISPR, and you know, George is known for being the father of genome sequencing, and also CRISPR was done on the bench I share in the Church lab. And so these technologies are absolutely transformative, and they affect everybody. And we just heard, you know, the stem cell panel talking about how iPSCs, that's a technology, plus CRISPR, that's like game-changing for everything. And so IXBio is focused on transformative tools and technologies. And to tie it into with this alternative financing theme here, we are now structured as a benefit company, and we believe that technology can be used in a unique way for both nonprofit and for-profit purposes. They are highly lucrative, and that can help pay for all the other uses. Baby KJ is sort of an example of an N of 1, where the technology, which could be used for treating sickle cell, which is a fairly common rare disease, but it's still fairly common, that can also be used for N of 1. And so we just believe that technology is the, you know, of the 3 things you could deploy to try and cure things or solve a problem: people capital, money, financial capital, and technology capital. And we think technology is the only one that can actually obviate or reduce the need for the other 2, in fact, even eliminate, right?
And is the creation of IXBio a direct response to the challenge of federal funding and traditional forms of funding?
I guess I think the timing is right. We've been thinking about this. I, being a serial entrepreneur in tech for half my career, and then the other half being in science, was frustrated with how places like Harvard, where I got my PhD, were focused on just science, but not the technology to bring things to market. First half of my career, I only did things that I thought were technology, never doing science. And I'm in an environment at Harvard where it's all science, but very little technology except for places like the Church lab. And so I am frustrated that we're not doing more technology. The NIH does not fund very much technology, even before all these cutbacks. So we've wanted to focus because we feel there's a huge gap in technology development. Great,
thank you. So do we have Randy's video that we can pull up? Okay, here it comes.
volume up?
Can you turn the volume up?
Childhood cancer has good and bad news. For certain leukemias, survival is now over 90%. I've seen these children shake it off and grow up to be fully functioning adults. For recurrent sarcomas, a cancer in tissue like muscle and bone, medicine has made no progress in 50 years. These young people face more chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, often amputation. Fortuna fave fortibus. Fortune favors the bold. I graduated with distinction from the U.S. Naval Academy, and my class motto is Fortuna fave fortibus. Let's be bold and create a miracle for children with cancer. I left Moderna to lead Merlin, a band of scientific and medical wizards, to develop a new therapy, Starlight. Starlight targets the cancer and literally acts to switch on the lights, enabling a child's immune system to uncloak the cancer and kill it. Starlight can change the world for children suffering from life-ending cancer. We need funds to properly test it before giving it to children in need. With your support, right now, we will rapidly and promptly move Starlight into clinical studies. I am an innovator, and I am in awe of how a child can look cancer in the eye and just smile. We owe that child a better life. Now, more than ever, we must support innovation, especially for the neediest children. Please help us help the kids. They need us. Please do it now. Thank you.
Well, that was inspiring. Thank you, Randy. Do you see room for a coordinated national effort similar to what we've seen in climate tech to align philanthropic and public funding around translational medicine?
Yes, thank you, Nancy, and great. It's great to be here, and thank you for this, your kind invitation. Yes, I think, I want to echo a little bit what Mona was saying, about the need for this valley of death, if you will, that we talk about it, but this funding opportunity for early stage. And Merlin's an early stage company. And the thing is, the funds, there are difficult to find. I think anybody who's raised money in that environment would pretty much agree. And so yes, we need to, this is where the innovation happens. This is where the breakthroughs are made. And honestly, there's nobody alive who can predict which preclinical products will become clinical success stories. And if they do exist, they belong in Wall Street, not doing this, okay? Because it's a better return. So we won't get them. And so yeah, there needs to be an effort to aggressively, because this is where it happens. Now, they're not all going to be successful. We know that. And some will. And those will make the stage for everybody.
So maybe the opportunity and the challenge that we've been facing recently is to look at how we can change the funding mechanisms and the way we evaluate early stage companies to make it more likely that they'll be able to get funding.
Yes, and more effort focused on it. It's just a key part of our future. And so I was fortunate, I discovered Mona and Music Beating Cancer at a meeting a few years ago, and this video is really part of that fundraising effort, the philanthropic dollars. This is a donation-driven. People who donate get a tax deduction, and then Mona's organization, a 501c3, then contracts with Merlin to develop the products. And this is what we're doing. We're getting creative. We have to. Mm-hmm. And so part of that strategy, let's just get creative together.
Right. So that's a great model. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to ask you one more question. Maybe each one of you can answer. Eric, let's start with you since I know you have to leave. What one reform or innovation would unlock more capital in the life sciences field?
Boy, leading off with that. I wish I had a better answer. The valley of death is something that we've all talked about, and it's real. And I think one of the things in healthcare is that it's not hyperbole. We're not talking about widgets. We're talking about lives, either mortality or morbidity. So we do need additional models of support for these early stage molecules or devices or even care models that can enable then the risk capital to come in. And the government does provide that, like SBIR and other kinds of granting organizations, but we need a lot more, and we need smaller amounts flowing into these earlier stage kind of opportunities, so that the risk capital, which has its own, like, even though we're philanthropically funded, so we have a little bit more maybe latitude to change things. The other capital out there, they have investors and they expect a return, and so the more that we can de-risk and support the earlier sciences to start taking the first steps across that bridge from across that valley of death, I think the better. What that looks like, I don't know, but I think public partnerships, collaborations across different types of funds, and I think state and local governments, in addition to the national efforts like at NIH and others, are all needed to spur the innovation and support it, so it can start taking some of those steps, and the other risk capital can come in to help finish the journey.
Great, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I completely agree, and completely agree with the last two speakers. And I think the theme that's emerging is that we start to think creatively about capital in this space, just because the traditional sources of capital have migrated towards lower risk, higher check sizes, effectively, kind of more towards the IPO transition landscape. And fewer people are willing to take early risk. Even if you look at like NIH grants, like they've gotten less risk tolerant. And what I enjoy hearing from this panel, it really mirrors what we've done, which is go to the people who are willing to take the biggest risks, which are the patients themselves. And they also are the best participants in the discovery process, because it's like product development 101. If you find a product that has a good product market fit, it is far more likely to be successful. And then who better to then partner with technically, which was their expertise, but also financially, than the patients who are actually experiencing the problems at hand. And so that's what we've done. We bring patients in from the very beginning as partners in the process. Part of it is the capital aspects, because it's very tough to get capital in that valley of death. But the reality is the valley of death until you're successful. There's so many programs that are successful and they fail at later stages, also for financial reasons. And so we're trying to figure out what are the best partners from the beginning. And the reality is that it's the patients. In rare disease, about 10% of the US population has a rare disease. That is a large number of people, not only the high net worth individuals, but we work with foundations that can really channel a lot of the funds, as we're hearing from a couple of these other groups on this panel. That's a way to channel funds from small donors or small investors into really meaningful change, and then drive that loop, right? So have it. Any successes can drive further discovery, further innovation in the space.
Yeah, so we heard that earlier, getting patients involved much earlier, right? Mona?
Yeah, so agreeing with both Eric and Richard, your question is, how do we unlock more capital? And my first thought is, we have a lot of philanthropy in this country. We have a lot of tax advantage dollars that are sitting in places and spaces, right? In donor advised funds alone, they report 230 million just in accounts growing, much of which it's in infidelity, frankly. So the capital is there, but how do we tap it? And one of the barriers to this capital, I believe, is that we have donor cynicism. I think people have, for the past 50 years, have been donating to research for the cure under the social contract that when they are sick, that cure will be available. But for so many people, the cancer patient journey is horrible. So I think we need to flip this narrative that, in fact, to fight this war on cancer, philanthropy can play a role in innovation, and innovation is an access to impact and cures and treatments and so forth. But largely the public is unaware, right? They still live in the silo research for the cure. And this is something we face with foundations all the time. We've spoken to hundreds, and we're up against this they don't believe it. When they think about innovation, they think about innovation in an academic lab. But they don't really understand the issues or the incentives, right? Academic labs are not, that's not their job to commercialize the science. That's our job in the biotech space. Yet, for many people who care, who want to see solutions and cures, they don't realize that. So there's a lot of educating that needs to go on, but also, and hence our name, Music Beats Cancer, I think we need to be out there in the popular culture. We've been so siloed for so long that if we don't bring popular culture influencers, musicians to help us shape new thinking, I don't think we can unlock the capital that we want.
Interesting. Randy?
Hey, Nancy, I certainly agree with Mona and Richard, and it's, insanity is what it's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, right? And I think, we clearly need to do something different because the system is broken. Small companies fail not because of technical problems. They don't fail because of lack of leadership. They don't fail because they ran out of laboratory space. They fail because of lack of capital. That's what it is. And so that is what we need to address. And 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about this business of donor-advised funds. This idea that, I imagine if I asked people in the audience how many people make a tax-deductible donation to charity, I'd get a lot of hands up. But then if I asked them, how many of you have any idea where your money actually went? I don't think any hands are coming up. And the thing is, with the donor advice fund, which I have to admit, I'm a student at this business, you can donate, get your tax deduction, and then you can direct where the donor advised fund puts that money. And it can go into, they can invest directly, and they have invest directly in small companies like mine. Now, the return on the capital goes back into the fund, not the donor, because the donor's out now, but the donor can direct it again. And they can send it somewhere else or do it again or whatever they want to do. And this is just very, very powerful. And this is partly how I became aware and involved with Music Beats Cancer, which is an example of doing this. And I think this is part of the solution. I'm not saying this is the only part of the solution. It's an important part that, in my opinion, this has been largely untapped. And I couldn't agree more with Mona. We have to get into the popular culture. There's people out there who these gamers have, I just heard this weekend, these gamers have 26 million followers. I don't think, of course they're young people, they're probably not thinking about cancer. However, cancer's thinking about them.
I just want to unpack one thing you said, because I think it would have escaped me, so I want to make sure our audience understands it. So the donor advised funds, they make a charitable contribution, which they get a tax deduction for. On the other end, you said the return goes back into the donor advised funds, but the return is actually generated by the equity. So if you have a liquidity event, but from selling equity or an IPO or something like that, that donor actually gets an equity size return.
Yes.
Goes back into the fund for reinvestment in other areas. So what started out as a charitable contribution comes back as an equity return. And that is what I think the real uniqueness of this new kind of financial instrument is, in the power that it has. Michael?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And by the way, when it comes back to the donor, they can't put that in their own bank account, but they can make greater donations. They can either leverage their donations or reinvest it and keep growing their donor advised fund. So I think it's a great vehicle that is highly underexploited. I'd like to pick up on what Mona said, this idea that people are disappointed and they're kind of burned out. Like if you went to a car mechanic and every time and 10% of the time you paid him, he fixed your car, and 90% of the time it failed, you'd stop using him pretty quickly and you get burned out. I'd say, in a nutshell, there's two things which we should change, that can change, and I'm going to be a broken record here, but they're reducing risk and increasing certainty. And so the reducing risk thing, well, it's obvious the way we want to reduce risk. When I got into bio, all people talked about is the valley of death and how you get through this and what kind of non-dilutive funding you need. I'm going to say the reason why we're focused on tools, because people think that's an immovable thing. Bio is very, very expensive. You have to raise tens of millions of dollars to get a drug or something. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe it's true because when we use technology, we can actually reduce the cost and reduce the entry, and Baby KJ is a perfect example of that situation. 6 months, I don't know how much it cost, but it wasn't billions of dollars to treat that one baby. So technology can have a profound effect on the risk of everything. Now, if 90% of what you're trying to do fail, it will disillusion people. Be like, I don't understand this market. This takes too much expertise. How am I going to guess which of the 10 things I'm going to bet on are going to fail? People don't do it. So the reason why tech and biotech are so different is because the certainty in tech is much higher. Nobody thinks that you're going to do a new app that you won't actually make the app, or that a new Tesla is going to come out next year. Technology is a completely different bet than science. Science is endless. Technology has a finite range. Sometimes we miss by overruns and underruns, but pretty much if we fail, it's a human error. Versus science, if we fail, it's because we didn't guess properly and we have no idea how the body works. So I think that changing what we invest in, I'm pushing for technology, obviously, but those things, when you invest in technology, it allows the science to be de-risked. And so that's why we're focused on technology, and I think those things will change. Once we de-risk, once it costs $10 million to do a drug, we'll have lots of investment.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of those tools today,
Yeah.
and how they're actually increasing our ability to succeed at a much lower cost. So thank you, all of you, for contributing this afternoon. I really appreciate all of our audience being here. Thank you for your patience as we try out a new venue, and we tried out a few new things like the breakout rooms, and it put us over a little bit in time, and I appreciate your patience as we're trying these new things to make our meetings, more responsive to what you're looking for and what you want. So now we've got a reception. Go enjoy and have a great networking event. Thank you.